Hello, my name is Grace Trautman and welcome to my senior recital. To complete my degree in piano performance at the University of Sioux Falls, I have been preparing this recital since the fall semester. As I was selecting repertoire, I wanted to find music that would not only be fun to play, but also enjoyable for my audience. I was inspired by my grandma to pick dance music throughout musical time periods. My hope is that as you listen to these songs, you can imagine yourself in another century, dancing to them with those that you love or alone, and enjoying the company of the composer. I studied these pieces and their composers, and what I have learned has given these pieces new life for me. My hope is that by sharing some interesting details and fun facts with you, you'll be able to enjoy listening even more. Dance music has evolved throughout the centuries, just as everything has. In the Baroque period, major dance styles were noble court dances. In the classical music era, the minuet was frequently used as a slow movement of a string quartet, symphony, or sonata. Waltzes added to minuets in the Romantic period, which also saw the rise in various nationalistic dance forms. We'll talk later about how composers like Chopin became icons in their countries as they wrote dance music to inspire their fellow countrymen. The mazurka, ballade, and polonaise came from this new nationalism of the Romantic period. You may have heard of Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker Suite or Brahms's 16 piano waltzes. These were part of this Romantic dance movement. In the 20th century, folk songs and dance music were recorded by Bartók and other composers to preserve the history of areas and people groups. After recording original songs, they orchestrated them for piano, quartets, or full orchestra so that the music could live on. Stravinsky composed ballets during this time, including The Rite of Spring. Today, we dance to pretty much anything, but I believe that what came before influences us more than we think. Over more recent years, ballroom dancing, jazz, swing, disco, and electronic dance music have come in and out of popularity. Though these may seemingly have nothing in common with what I'll be playing for you today, I hope that we can all see how the music today has been influenced by the past. From Bartók's rhythm to Brahms's soloistic piano, samples of each of these can be found in our music today. We will start in the Baroque time period, which began in 1600s in Rome, Italy, and spread throughout Europe in the 17th and 18th centuries. This was also called the Age of Science or the Age of the Virtuoso. It was during this time that minds like Sir Isaac Newton and Sir Francis Bacon were at work to understand the world around us. The word Baroque describes something elaborate and highly detailed. You can expect large cathedrals and painted ceilings from Baroque architecture. The word Baroque uses lots of contrast, which you can see clearly in the music and artwork in this time. Baroque painters used warm and intense colors and asymmetry, occurring away from the center of the picture. Music was heard in the church and in king's courts, but was becoming more accessible for the public during this time. Johann Sebastian Bach was orphaned at age 9, after which he began composing music for churches and universities. In the last decades of his life, he reworked and extended many of these early compositions. It was in his early years that Bach was exposed to the great music of the time, learned violin, and studied, performed, and copied music. In his teenage years, Johann lived with his brother Johann Christoph Bach, who taught him the clavichord. Over half the men in the Bach family tree share the name Johann. Translated in English to John, this name means God is merciful. The Bach family has over 50 known musicians and several composers. Johann Ambrosius Bach was the director of town musicians, and his son, Johann Sebastian Bach, is the most well-known today. The piano was not yet invented until 1700, so most of the keyboard music in the Baroque time period was written for clavichord or harpsichord. There's debate on which instrument Bach preferred, but we can say for sure that he didn't play an instrument like this one. Bach experimented with fugues, modulation, four-part harmony, and ornamentation, as demonstrated in this partita. He wrote 6 partitas for solo harpsichord. When he published them in 1726, he labeled them as instructional compositions. With 7 parts, the musician gets to experience a variety of demanding pieces. From the moderately paced allemande to the triple meter courant and an energetic jig, there is something new to be learned in each section. These were some of the last keyboard suites Bach composed before he died in 1750. The partitas are said to be the most technically demanding of any keyboard piece he wrote in his career. The 7 movements include the Prelude, Allemande, Courant, Sarabande, Minuets 1 and 2, and Jig. Prelude introduces the rest of the partita. A minuet is a dance for two people, usually in triple meter. The word minuet is adapted from French, meaning slender and small. This is referring to the small steps that is usually taken in early 17th century dances. Unfortunately, Bach went blind and passed away due to complications from an eye surgery. I found it interesting that John Taylor, Bach's surgeon, also blinded Handel while trying to remove a cataract a year before Bach's botched surgery. The Baroque period died with Bach's death. His music is considered to be the culmination of Baroque style. 1850 to 1820, we have the classical period. Classical music is lighter in texture and less intricate than Baroque music. It uses clear melody lines and shows defined elegance, seriousness, and impressive grandeur, while creating variety. Part of that variety comes from the harpsichord being replaced by the pianoforte, which quite literally means soft loud. Orchestras in this time period increased in size, range, and power. Opera and ballet were introduced, and the population began to appreciate music more. Sometimes the classical period is referred to as the Age of Enlightenment because it was in this time that theologians and philosophers began learning more about the world, and this information was made available to the middle class through public education. People started to think for themselves, leading to America being founded during this time as well. Art in the classical period was very beautiful and included not only landscapes, but portraits too. Artists during the classical period worked to make everything beautiful, painting with a very soft touch. The classical style is very easy to spot because of the light and subtle colors. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was a child prodigy on the keyboard and violin. He was born and raised in Salzburg and began composing and playing for the King's Court at age 5. During his adult life, he lived in Vienna, Austria. He composed more than 600 classical works, including symphonic, chamber, operatic, and choral music. He is best known for his operas, including greats like The Marriage of Figaro, Don Giovanni, and The Magic Flute. He wrote a total of 22 operas in his lifetime. Mozart didn't attend his father's funeral. Around a week after his father died in 1787, his pet starling passed away. Instead of going back to Salzburg for his father's funeral, he buried his starling in the grandest way. Mourners in heavy veils marched in procession, sang hymns, and listened to Mozart recite a poem he'd written for the occasion. By the tiny gravesite, the world's greatest composer spoke with love of his starling, who was gay and bright, and not naughty quite. There is a conspiracy theory about how Mozart died, because Antonio Sorelli, Mozart's musical rival, accused himself of killing Mozart while having a mental breakdown. In actuality, we know that Mozart died at age 35 while composing a requiem, but we don't know how. Modern diagnoses for his recorded symptoms include tuberculosis, mercury poisoning, syphilis, and rheumatic fever, to name a few. He was buried in an unmarked grave with no mourners present. This sonata was composed in 1788 and publicized in 1799, after Mozart's death in 1791. Most sonatas are 3 movements, but this sonata has only 2. Some editions of the sonata include a 3rd movement, consisting of a set of 6 variations, but it is unclear if this movement was composed by Mozart or by his editor. Allegro is a fast-paced movement in 3/4, and the second movement, Allegretto, is a fairly fast tempo and is in 2/4. While the first movement has stark contrasts and sections, the second movement is much more carefree and simple. It is very unusual to not have a 3rd movement in sonatas like this, but I think that this piece is really unique in not having one. Romantic music is related to the broader concept of Romanticism, which is the intellectual, artistic, and literary movement that became prominent in Europe from approximately 1820 to 1900. It is referred to as the Age of Emotion, with expressive and dramatic music. Music is now for the amateur as well as for the virtuoso, as seen in the symphonic poems, art songs, ballad songs, and parlor songs from the day. The Romantic period included a preoccupation with and a surrender to nature and a turn towards the mystic and supernatural. Authors like Jane Austen wrote during the Romantic period, and Romantic composers included Mendelssohn, Robert and Clara Schumann, Liszt, and Wagner. Frederic Chopin is known for his virtuosic piano pieces from the Romantic era. He lived the life of a superstar in his native Poland. From his high-profile love life to his distant association with political uprising, he had everything the people wanted in a famed musician. Chopin pulls from the classical traditions of Bach and Mozart, who we've already talked about today. His music is deeply rooted in the nationalism that the Romantic era is known for. All of Chopin's compositions include piano, and most are for solo piano. His major works include mazurkas, a stylistic folk dance in triple meter, nocturnes, a composition inspired by the night, polonaises, a dance of Polish origin in 3/4 time, ballades, a piece with lyrical and dramatic narrative qualities, and waltzes like this one, ballroom and folk dances in triple time. This waltz in D-flat major is often referred to as the Minuet waltz by editors, even though it is impossible to play this piece in just 1 minute. The literal translation of the French title that I'm not going to try to butcher today is Waltz of the Puppy. A Chopin biographer says that Chopin was inspired to write this piece after watching a small dog chase its tail. I like the imagery of a puppy running around, and I hope that this adds to your experience of the song as well. This waltz has been a favorite for years. In her 1966 album, Barbra Streisand did a vocal version of it. I thought it was interesting that Streisand's version of this waltz was performed in the 1969 premiere season of Sesame Street. Chopin composed this waltz in 1847, 2 years before his death at the age of 39. The modern era in music is the most vague to describe because this is where everything diversifies. The very notion of what constitutes music is redefined. Innovation in music leads to change in melody, harmony, and especially rhythmic aspects. Our concept of tonality is challenged in the modern era. Major-minor tonality is so common throughout all of music and is completely abandoned by many composers. Some composers decided to write with no tonal center, while others with 2 or more tonal centers or free tonality. The modern era doesn't just have weird atonal music, though. Jazz and pop are also introduced here. Dmitri Shostakovich was a Soviet-Russian composer and pianist. He composed the 3 Fantastic Dances at age 14 in 1920. He used unique harmonic language that has historic importance because of the years that he worked under Stalin. He is one of the major composers of the 20th century, and as a polystylist, he has composed a variety of different musical techniques into his works, including sharp contrasts and ambivalent tonality. These are not typical dances that you're used to hearing, but include many unique and purely Shostakovich twists. Shostakovich joined the Communist Party in 1960. His son later recalled that Dmitri told his wife Irina that he had been blackmailed, and he was reported to have been suicidal after this. His 12th symphony portrays the Bolshevik Revolution, and 13th symphony is against anti-Semitism. The 8th string quartet was composed in only 3 days and was written to the victims of fascism and war. In true Russian fashion, Shostakovich resisted giving up cigarettes and vodka as his health declined. He had to give up playing piano because in 1958, polio affected his right hand. He suffered from heart attacks and once broke both of his legs in a fall. He seemed to have a sense of humor about it because one day in 1967 he wrote in a letter, "Target achieved thus far, 75%. Right leg broken, left leg broken, right hand defective. All I need to do is wreck the left hand and then 100% of my extremities will be out of order." Dmitri was obsessed with cleanliness. He synchronized the clocks in his apartment and regularly sent himself letters to test the postal service. These 3 dance movements include Allegretto, a march, Argentino, a waltz, and Allegretto, a polka. I love how each movement has its own character. For example, every time I play the first movement, I see finches in the spring. I encourage you to close your eyes and see what Shostakovich dances look like to you. This is a modern piece with dazzling accompaniment. I started accompanying in high school and have loved doing it ever since. Playing for someone is very different than playing alone and requires not only attention to details in the piece, but also attention to the vocalist in his or her tempo, style, and dynamic level. I learn by watching, and over my time at the University of Sioux Falls, I have sat in countless departmental recitals with vocal solos accompanied by Deanna Worspan. By watching her, I have learned the importance of always keeping an eye on the singer. This means that you have to know the music well enough to not only be looking at it all the time, but also have an eye on the music in case the vocalist skips a section. These are things that I have learned and continue to learn as I prepare this piece and other accompaniments. This folk piece was recorded by Ruelle, or Maggie Eckford, in 2016. She had a fascination with Broadway growing up and taught herself songs from Phantom of the Opera and Cats. Ruelle has always been drawn to drama, which is why this song has lots of drama and emotion. Ruelle has sung in soundtracks and been recorded from multiple albums since her musical career launched in 2014. Her songs have been featured in Grey's Anatomy and the 2016 Summer Olympics promo. Though this is not a traditional dance piece, as I play the accompaniment, I imagine someone in a ball gown dancing through a dimly lit, empty ballroom, almost Beauty and the Beast style. Thanks for joining me. I hope that you enjoyed these dances and were able to learn something as well. Special thanks to my piano professor, Carol Flower, for teaching me and pushing me. Nancy Wilcoxon for advising me through college and teaching me so much about music history, and Doctors Jonathan Niederheiser and Dave DK for teaching me about conducting, music theory, and music in general throughout my time at USF. I'd also like to thank Mrs. Biggie for nurturing my love of piano through high school, my sister Claire for video recording and singing for me, and Max Reagan for his video skills. If you would like to visit more about anything that I said or played today, feel free to reach out. Have a great day.